So today we're starting off with a fascinating journey of Sahih Bukhari, which is obviously the most authentic book, which tells us about the life of the Prophet in terms of what he said and what he did. And it's a very interesting book. And so without further ado, we will start off with the first chapter. Now, one of the things that is so interesting about Bukhari is, the way that he has named, given the titles of the chapters or the sections, has been a big topic of discussion and makes this book very, very interesting. Because there are times when it appears, the title and the content that follows is something slightly different. But if you just take a slightly deeper look, you begin to find some very interesting nuggets of knowledge and information there. So the first chapter that Imam Bukhari started the book with is called Kitab Bada'ul Wahi, which is, the start of the revelation. Because I guess he just wanted to start with, the actual advent of Islam, which starts with, of course, revelation. So although there's a lot of history, of the Prophet before revelation came, but Bukhari started to start his book with the start of the revelation. Now, when you go and start reading in the book, under the chapter, the first thing you will see is he refers to the Quran, where he says, there's a verse in the Quran which says, "Inna awhayna ilayka kama awhayna ila Nuh wal nabiyina min ba'dih." We have revealed to you, O Muhammad, just like we revealed to Prophet Noah and the Prophet Noah and the prophets before him. And this is very interesting, which a lot of people probably don't recognize, or this is often ignored, is that although this is a book of hadith, he's starting with a verse. So, as Muslims, we know that the very first book of reference, or the most authentic book, obviously, is the Word of God, or the Quran, the Word of Allah. And so even Imam Bukhari, when he starts this chapter, he starts most often with verses from the Quran. Okay, so that's something very interesting. And then when we look at the first hadith, this is a hadith where Ilqa bin Waqas says, I heard anhu, he was sitting at the Mambar and he said, I heard the Prophet say, "Innamal a'malu binniyat," that all actions are depending on their intentions, and every person will get what he intended for. So if somebody was to migrate to a certain place for the purpose of dunya, or for a woman, then that is what he would have migrated for. And of course, implying thereby that somebody who migrates for Allah will get rewarded accordingly. But if somebody migrated for somebody else, that is what they would get rewarded for. So now you would begin to think, hang on, we're talking about the start of Wahi. So how did this hadith come in here? Okay, so right off the bat, just on the very first chapter, this is where you begin to sort of understand that there is probably some method to the madness in terms of why Imam Bukhari is brought this hadith before he starts talking about the revelation itself. And a lot of different scholars have given different views. Some of them have said, for example, that because this was the start of something very, very important, and Imam Bukhari wanted to make sure that he wanted to let everybody know that when you're starting off something which is really, really good, it's important to get your intentions right. So that is why he brought this hadith of intentions as a starting point. That is one. But more interestingly, if we just look at the process of revelation itself, we have to remember that the very first wahy or revelation that Muhammad received was when he used to, he had some dreams, and then he used to go for a few days. He used to leave his wife Khadija at home, and he used to go in the cave of Hira. Okay, And it was there in one of those days that, the Prophet Jibreel alayhi salam came, and, there's the entire story, which we'll come to later on, where he clutched Prophet Muhammad, he held him strongly, and he said, read in the name of the Lord. So that was the first wahi, Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. And so, the fact that that first wahi happened in Hira was because the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, according to the knowledge that he had at that time, he did his best to separate himself, from his house and everything else, and he would, spend a day or slightly more in the cave of Hira, where he was just by himself. So, indicating the purity of intention. Okay, so it was that purity of intention that was preceded by the revelation coming in. Okay, so that's a very interesting fine connection that you could potentially find here, and of course there are other factors to this that we'll be discussing later on. But this is how it starts off, the very first hadith of Bukhari. And then the second one actually goes on to the subject of revelation, where it says, in Hisham radiallahu anhu, he says, Rasulullah sallam, فَقَالَ يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ كَيْفَ يَأْتِيكَ الْوَحِيِّ. The Prophet was asked, how does wahi come to you? فَقَالَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ أَحْيَانِي مِثْلَ سَلْسَلَةِ الْجَرَسِ. Sometimes it comes to me, when in the form of, just like you've got, for example, bells ringing, that kind of a noise, and from that he could then, of course, وَهُوَ أَشَدُّهُ عَلَيَّ فَيُفْصُمُ عَنِّي. And when it happens in that format, where it is in the sound of, for example, bells, he said that is the toughest form of revelation that comes to me, and then I end up, sweating even on a cold day. So that was the first hadith, or the opening chapter, the first two hadiths of Bukhari, and then we'll continue our journey from here.